truth with Jesus. Finding strength in Jesus.
Ever get that feeling like time is just, I don't know, slipping away? Like, wouldn't it be wild if we could just see the past, present, and future all at once?
All at the same time.
Yeah. That's kind of what we're looking at today.
Yeah.
How our human idea of time might be totally different from like a God perspective.
Right.
And we've got some really interesting theological stuff, some Bible passages. And just to mix things up a little bit, we're going to look at Interstellar too.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
It's a big question, isn't it?
It is.
What if instead of time being like a straight line,
Yeah.
you could step outside of it? That's
Yeah.
what a lot of theologians think God can do.
Yeah. So let's start with the theology writings.
Okay.
They seem to be saying that God isn't like in time like we are.
Right.
He sees the whole timeline.
Exactly. Like watching a movie.
Okay.
We see it one frame at a time.
Right.
God sees the whole thing at once.
The whole thing.
Beginning, middle, end. All at the same time.
So, like, imagine being able to see every choice you ever made and all the choices you can make all laid out in front of you.
Right.
How would that change how you thought about your life?
Wow.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, if God's not stuck in this straight timeline,
Right.
it changes how we think about things, like how God steps in.
So it's not like he's waiting for something to happen
Right.
because he already sees it.
Exactly.
Okay, so if God's not bound by our idea of time, how does that affect how he acts in the world? Would that mean he could, like, intervene in ways that seem completely random to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. Think about the incarnation.
Right.
God becoming human in Jesus.
But wait a minute. How can someone who's outside of time
Right.
actually enter into time?
It's a paradox.
Isn't that a paradox?
For sure.
It's like one of those things that just keeps me up at night.
Well, maybe it shows us the limits of what we can understand.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Yeah.
The incarnation is a mystery. It goes beyond how we normally think.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love how this connects with Interstellar.
Yes.
Like, the film gives us a visual way to think about these theological ideas.
Yeah.
Remember how it plays with the idea of wormholes?
Oh, yeah.
Like those shortcuts through space and time?
Right.
It's wild.
A journey that could take hundreds of years.
Hundreds of years.
Compressed into like an instant.
Yeah.
If we could do that to time,
Right.
it would change everything.
About how we understand distance travel, even how long humans can live.
Absolutely.
And Interstellar doesn't stop there.
No, it doesn't.
It goes into that whole time dilation thing near a black hole.
Right?
Remember how time moves slower for the people closer to the black hole?
I do.
It really highlights how relative time is.
Right. Time's not just this fixed thing. You know,
Yeah.
it can be warped
Warped.
and distorted.
Yeah.
Which makes you think, if gravity could do that,
Yeah.
imagine what a being outside of space and time might experience.
Okay, but speaking of mind bending,
Yeah.
let's talk about that Tesseract scene
Okay.
where Cooper can talk to his daughter Murph across different points in time.
Right.
If you could send a message to your past self, would you change anything? It makes you think.
It does. It connects to that idea of God's providence.
Okay.
You know how he guides and cares for the world?
Yeah.
Does he interfere? Or does he work through time itself in ways we just don't get?
That's a big question.
It is.
And it leads us right to another tricky thing. Free will.
Yeah.
If God sees the whole timeline, does that mean we really have free will?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
The theological stuff we have seems to say that God knowing the future doesn't get rid of free will.
So how does that work?
Okay.
God knows what choices we'll make, but we still have the freedom to choose.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
You know your friend really well.
Yeah.
You might be able to guess what they'll choose.
Right.
Pretty accurately.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you're forcing them to make those choices.
So God knowing our choices doesn't mean he's writing our lives.
Right.
It just means he knows us that well.
That's one way to look at it.
Right.
And it connects back to what we were saying about Interstellar.
Okay.
Even though those characters are facing things that seem set in stone,
Right.
they still have to make choices.
Yeah.
And those choices have consequences.
This is getting pretty heavy.
It is a lot to take in.
Maybe we should take a break here
Okay.
and let these ideas sink in for a bit. I don't know about you,
Yeah.
but I'm already starting to question everything I thought I knew about time.
It's mind-blowing stuff.
It is.
It really is.
Okay, so we're back. And I'm really struck by how all this theology on God's timelessness actually kind of fits with some of the science stuff in Interstellar.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how those two things come together.
Yeah.
You know, the films look at how gravity warps time.
Uh-huh.
It's like that theological idea that God isn't stuck in our straight line way of seeing time.
Yeah, it's almost like Interstellar is giving us like a visual
Yeah.
way we can actually picture
Right.
this thing that's totally abstract.
Exactly. Remember that scene with Cooper and the Tesseract?
Oh, yeah.
Communicating with Murph across time.
Right?
It makes you think about how something outside of time could actually interact with our world.
It really does. What if what we see as God, like stepping in,
Right.
is actually just him working within a time framework that we just can't even fathom?
Totally.
Hmm.
And what's even cooler is how both the theological sources and Interstellar seem to say that choices matter,
Okay.
even when things seem pre-decided.
You're talking about free will again, right?
Exactly. The idea that even if God knows the future, we can still choose our path.
The church fathers said that, right?
They did.
Yeah.
Like John of Damascus.
Yeah.
He said, God knowing what we'll choose doesn't take away our freedom.
Okay.
It just means he knows us so well that he gets what we'll do.
So God's not like a puppet master.
Right.
We still have like agency, the ability to make decisions that change our lives.
Exactly. And you see something similar in Interstellar.
Yeah.
Cooper is being guided by those future humans,
Right.
but he still has to make big choices that change everything.
So it all comes back to that question, are we just pawns in some big cosmic game?
Right.
Or can we actually shape our destinies?
It's the question people have been asking forever.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's another cool parallel between our sources.
Okay.
That idea of purpose. The theology stuff focuses on theosis.
Union with God.
Right. That's like the ultimate goal of being human.
And in Interstellar, it's all about humanity surviving.
Right. Driven by love and wanting to keep going.
So both stories are saying that even with this huge cosmos and
Yeah.
time being so complex,
Right.
there's a deeper meaning there.
Absolutely. A force that pushes us forward.
This is getting pretty intense.
It is. It's a deep dive for sure.
I feel like we're peeling back layers of reality here.
We are. That's the cool thing about it. It makes us think about things in new ways. And it shows how even a sci-fi movie like Interstellar can make us think about deep theological stuff.
I love how we're connecting these totally different ideas, ancient theology and modern sci-fi.
It's amazing what happens when we let these things talk to each other.
It really is. And it shows how powerful these questions about time, purpose, and free will really are.
Yeah.
These are questions that have always mattered to people.
Right.
And they still fascinate us today.
They do.
So where do we go from here? I feel like we've just scratched the surface.
I agree.
There's so much more to uncover.
We've gone through theological discussions, traveled through wormholes, and thought about the mysteries of the incarnation. But there are still more things to find out.
Okay.
More angles to look at. Ready for one last push.
Let's do it. You know, it's crazy how this deep dive has taken us from ancient theological writings to like the edge of a black hole.
I know, right?
It's wild.
I
And
know.
it's making me realize that like the more we learn, the more we hit the limits of what we can really grasp.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's like we're always trying to figure out the universe,
Right.
time,
Yeah.
our own existence,
Yeah.
but we're doing it all from this limited human point of view.
So our whole understanding of time is shaped by the fact that we experience it in this straight line.
Exactly.
But what we've been reading suggests that God operates outside of those limits.
Right.
He sees the whole tapestry of time all at once.
And even Interstellar, with those wormholes and time dilation stuff,
Yeah.
it reminds us that our idea of time isn't absolute.
If gravity can warp and stretch time,
Yeah.
imagine what a being outside of time might experience.
It's mind-blowing.
It really is. And then there's the incarnation, the idea that God, who is outside of time, actually entered into time to become one of us.
It's a mystery that really pushes the boundaries of logic.
Right. And even the way God interacts with the world,
Right.
influencing events without like messing with cause and effect,
Right.
it suggests he's working on a level we just can't get.
Yeah, it's like he's playing a different game.
So are we just stuck?
Well, not necessarily. I think the key is to recognize those limits,
Okay.
to admit that we're not going to have all the answers.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we stop exploring.
Right.
It's that wonder, that mystery that keeps us searching.
It's like the more we learn, the more we realize how much we don't know.
Exactly.
But that's what makes it so exciting. It's like we're standing on the edge of this infinite ocean and we're just starting to dip our toes in.
I love that analogy. You know, it's not just about science or theology.
Right.
This idea applies to how we live our lives too.
Okay.
If we accept that our understanding of time is limited,
Yeah.
it can change how we see our relationships, our goals, even our regrets.
So instead of dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, we can focus on being present in this moment, knowing that God sees it all, past, present, and future, as one whole thing.
It's a very freeing thought.
It really is, and it brings us back to free will.
Right.
If God's view of time is so different from ours,
Yeah.
maybe our choices have a bigger impact than we can even imagine.
Maybe every decision we make
Every action.
is like a ripple in this giant ocean of
I mean,
time.
God sees those ripples,
Not as separate events,
but as part of a bigger interconnected pattern.
it's a beautiful way to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, so for Christians living in a world that's obsessed with time,
Right.
how do we balance that feeling of urgency with this eternal viewpoint?
Okay.
You know, we're always rushing, scheduling, trying to fit everything in.
That's such a relevant question for how we live our lives.
Right.
And that's something we'll explore right after this.
All right, so we're back and ready to tackle that question. How do we balance our time-obsessed world with the reality of God's timeless perspective?
It is a challenge, we all face, but I actually think understanding God's timelessness can be a source of peace
Really?
rather than stress.
Okay, how so?
Well, when we're so fixated on our own limited human time frame,
Right.
it's easy to get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Deadline schedules,
Yeah.
feeling like we're running out of time.
With a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it creates so much pressure.
Yeah, tell me about it.
hmm
Sometimes my to-do list feels like it's taking over my life.
I hear that.
Yeah.
But, when we shift our focus to God's eternal perspective, it changes everything.
Okay.
We realize our lives are part of a much bigger story,
Right.
one that goes beyond our earthly calendars.
So instead of feeling trapped by time,
Yeah.
we see ourselves as part of something much bigger
Yes.
and longer lasting.
Exactly. And that shift in perspective
Yeah.
can bring incredible peace.
Okay.
We can let go of the need to control everything,
Like,
to force outcomes, to measure our worth by what we accomplish in a
Yeah.
certain time frame.
it's like surrendering our anxieties to a God who sees the whole picture,
Yes.
who knows the beginning from the end,
Yeah.
and who's working everything out for our good.
Beautifully put. And when we surrender to God's timing,
Okay.
we find a new kind of freedom.
Okay.
We can live in the present moment,
Mm-hmm.
trusting that God is guiding us,
Right.
even when we can't see where the path is leading.
That doesn't mean we become passive, though, right?
No, not at all.
Like we stop setting goals.
It just means we approach those goals with a different attitude.
Okay.
We work hard, we strive for excellence,
Right.
but without that frantic energy that
Yeah.
comes from feeling like everything depends on us,
Mm-hmm.
we can rest in God's sovereignty.
As we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's one final thought you'd leave with our listeners?
I would encourage you to consider this. If God experiences all of time at once,
Okay.
how does that affect your understanding of prayer?
That's a good question.
Does it make your conversations with God feel more intimate,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that he's not bound by our time limitations?
That's a really powerful question. It really makes you think about your relationship with God
It does.
in a whole new way.
Yeah.
And folks, this is just a glimpse of what you can discover
Yeah.
when you explore these profound theological concepts.
There's always more to learn.
Right.
And that journey of discovery is so enriching.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on this mind-bending adventure.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.